Who would you say are friends between West, East, Global South?
The West has realized that they've been squeezing the necks of South Africa for a long time. From the conversations of we're going to take you out of AGOA to them hosting an AGOA conference in South Africa, to them now taking off sanctions from Zimbabwe. What people don't want to have a conversation about in South Africa, when it comes to Eskom, who built Kusile? When furnaces are falling on top of each other, who built it?
Who built it? Welcome back to Palatable Politics, a show where we take the complexity out of politics, make it palatable for you. With me, host TJ Maslela, welcome to the show. Today's show, we're going to be discussing politics, business, the economy, and also what's happening in South Africa. Here to give us insight is none other than an influencer, a media maven, a nerdy creator, Mr. Zimasa. So here's something interesting, Vabaza. Welcome to the show.
Hi, TJ.
I'm good, and you?
Good. I don't know if politics is palatable in an election year. I think people just get more politically aware, but I think the palatability... You see, South Africans have a very short attention span.
Yeah.
I can already feel them.
Also.
Yeah, I can already feel them going, this politics thing. And I don't really feel like the campaigns have gotten off.
I feel that too.
I've
seen the politicking.
It's different this time around.
Yeah, no. I've seen the politicking. The politicking has started.
Yeah.
But the campaigns, yes, they've launched manifestos. But I understand what you're saying. Like, we haven't seen the ads.
Nothing.
Yeah.
It feels a bit wet blanket type stuff. It feels like, for how important this election is, I feel that everybody has gotten out the blocks way late.
You think it could be a thing of funding?
Yes, and I mean, I always feel like the funding thing was such a crazy concept to me, because I think it also, yes, definitely want to know who's putting money into politics, but the amounts and the limits, they limit everyone. So I think at times people thought that it was the type of thing that would limit sort of like the governing party, etc. But it ended up limiting everybody. And I think what that does, it's very double-edged if you actually think about it. With less money in politics, you've got the smaller guys not being able to also generate funding based off what they've got to offer a base of people, because we're not just like one thing, right? So I think it cancels out everybody. I don't know if it's for the good or it's for the good or it's for worse. We'll figure it out, I think, on the 1st or the 2nd or the 3rd of June.
So one of the reasons for the Political Party Funding Act was that basically Constitutional Court was saying that we need to understand who funds political parties to understand what mandate they're pushing, which now brings the link between politics and economics.
Yes.
Break that down for us.
So I think there was always an overlap. There is an overlap, because what democracy really is, right, is in a way a platform that people group themselves together, right, and vote based off certain views, thus giving a party, a person, right, or an organization a mandate to go and govern based off what and how they feel as a grouping of people. So yes, democratically, we have this open space that allows us to do all of these things singularly, but it's better when you group things together and you know that we all kind of like think alike. And that's our basis. Now, every revolution that has ever been run, right, has been done so using money. Every war you've ever waged in the history of humankind that I know of has needed a war chest. Somebody's got to pay the people who actually do the work, right? So whether that's your staffers, that's your politicians, etc. All of these people, right, need to be paid, because that's the currency that we use, right? That's how you stay alive on this planet. Now, what then happens is that you've got the needs of the people and the groupings. You've got those people that said, we have a view, right? And we want to get somewhere. And we want this view to be reflected in how the country is governed. But those people are never told that we need money to do this, right?
Okay.
They say we can go and do this thing for you. We can go represent you in parliament.
Yes.
But the everyday life of a politician in South Africa needs to be audited, not to say, are you overspending or are you not? Are they being paid enough, one? Because I have a different view to say, I don't think that civil servants in this country are remunerated according to what and how the expectation that we have relative to the results that they need to take out matches. So there is a need for money in politics that people don't want to admit, firstly. That so every time there's supposedly a scandal, someone's stolen money, etc., we are obviously incensed at that. We're like, money shouldn't be stolen. But have we ever looked and said, is there enough money in politics that the need to steal is something that doesn't come up to the top? Now, when it comes to the funding of political parties and where money starts to overlap, it is in the influence of the people who are given a mandate by the everyday man on the street, where the person who has money and economic strength comes to you and says, I know what the base of people, your base of people wanted, but I think we should go a different direction. And I've got the economic muscle to ensure that you would stray a little bit away from what they wanted and a lot more towards me. You'd come towards what I want. Now, there are no guards or safeguards in that generally globally, right? Billionaires move around the way that they want to, etc., and they do what they want. And we still create this facade of democracy being democratic and being something that any single person that goes to the voting votes and then their voice will be heard. This is the rhetoric. There's always rhetoric that says to you, this is what happens when you vote. But the reality is that people themselves are asking, okay, if I do this thing, is there really a voice in me voting?
So, okay, you've touched on the economic side and the voting side. I mean, straightforward. But taking a step back to making it palatable.
Yeah.
What's the money required for?
The money is required for simple things to run organizations. So the one thing that we actually don't associate with politics is the corporatization of politics, right? In other words, the office, the secretariat. There are people that go into offices on a daily basis that must be paid. That's one. There are needs, whether you're running an NPO or whether you're running a corporate company, people need to be paid. That's one. You need money to grease whatever outcomes you're looking for, right? And I'm not using that in the way that you're gonna stop it. So you actually need money to get things done. Whether you're doing you've got a communications team of professionals that you want to be paid, whether you've got a research team, whether you've got a legal team as a political party, whether you want to print posters, whether you want to get ads out there. Those things don't come for free because you still operate in a corporate and in a capitalist market where those services that you need as a political party must still be paid for. That's where the money comes in. Now, what people pay towards political parties in memberships, etc., doesn't suffice when it comes to the needs versus what we have. So therefore, there is a gap. And wherever there is a gap, in nature, just like in anything, capitalism doesn't allow for a gap. It's either you are out or someone's got to pay for that money or that money's got to be solicited from somewhere. So that's where this kind of push and pull finds its center in this dynamism. Money is needed.
So, okay. In line with that, money is needed, government spending.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk that ANC's debt to GDP is too high.
Yeah.
But we've seen in other countries, it's been much higher. In Japan, it's more than 200%. UK, US.
We're like at 74, I think. 74%.
Somewhere like that. What's your view on that? How should government spending be?
I like this. So I had the pleasure and the privilege of being in Davos this year, right, in Switzerland.
We saw those videos.
And I don't want to say I had a conversation, but I had a loose conversation with the Minister of Finance. And I had an opportunity to put across my views. and I'll put them across to the audience as well, and maybe let's shoot some holes and poke some holes if there are to be. I believe that one of the things that South Africa does wrong when it comes to our monetary policy is that, one, we're not aggressive about generating money for the country. We're aggressive about looking at the costs. We're a household that doesn't have enough money, but we still don't go out and work to get more. This makes no sense to me, one. Two, government departments, SOEs, are overspending money. There is a deficit because at some point somebody overspent, right? Why? Why did you overspend?
Could it not be a thing of funding infrastructure projects?
Well,
okay, you go get a loan to thingy that. Oh, I guess even just your tax revenue shortfall.
So the last time South Africa rolled out a massive infrastructure project was probably 2010, which means that it was funded before 2010 and was accounted for. Now, if you go back and you look, the last time South Africa had a budget surplus was around 2004. I can stand corrected, but it was the Mbeki years, right? Second term of the Mbeki years. There was a surplus. That means that the country had money left over. So from that, it was easy for us to also fund a lot of infrastructure projects leading up to 2010, etc. Roads. Everybody, if you remember 2010 and you were of adult age or conscious age, you realize that a lot of stuff was done around South Africa. Like, we had visitors coming over, and like a black family, you got to make sure that the kitchen cabinet is done. So that we did a lot of work, right? Our road systems, Ria Vaya at that time was properly working. I took Ria Vayas to stadiums all the time. So a lot of stuff was done around the country. We built stadiums, we renovated things, everybody got behind it. Like, public-private partnerships got in, hotels were revamped, restaurants, etc. A lot of stuff was done, right? And this was following on government spending. But remember, we came from a surplus as well, right? So we were able to fund a lot of these things.
But wait, take a step back. Yeah. What constitutes a major infrastructure project?
So I think what would constitute a major infrastructure project is something that a public infrastructure project, because a waterfall is a massive... Waterfall City is a massive infrastructure project, but it's a private thing. So I think it's anything that doesn't constitute routine maintenance. That's one. So it's not us just maintaining like how we would maintain. So it's special maintenance of saying this what road has always been here, and it's not just making sure that the lines are painted, etc. We're literally resurfacing the entire thing. That's what I constitute. That's one. Two, we're probably building a building that wasn't there. Or three, we're taking one that's dilapidated now, and yes, it's not routine, and it's something that requires a lot of money. So that's what I think it is.
With that said, I know under there were two universities.
Yes.
Mpumalanga and Northern Cape.
Yes.
That wouldn't constitute.
No, it would.
Okay.
It would, because there wasn't a varsity in both of those, right? And also, it wasn't them maintaining something routinely. It was a completely new project, which means that funds had to be created or found for that particular project, for those two projects.
Okay. Now, we've seen that, there's a narrative that, even in these infrastructure projects, there is growth, and it's only the rich that really see the proceeds.
That benefit,
Yeah. How does one or continue to have infrastructure growth, or economic growth, and have that translate to the UNIs?
That's interesting. I think at times we think in a very monolithic way as when it comes to economics. I don't want to skirt or get close to trickle-down economics, because that's just another thing on its own. But I think people in South Africa are very much concentrated on a me thing, right? And not to say that we shouldn't, but to say we're overly concerned about things like that. And I don't know if it's maybe a dependency thing that we have, but it's always a conversation around that. So let's say, for instance, infrastructure growth varies from industry to industry, and thus the impact of that varies. So let us say if you were not particularly either in construction, right, at the time 2010, going up to 2010, or were not in sports, you would have felt like I didn't get anything out of 2010, which is a tricky thing to kind of consider because the world around you got better. So if you didn't use a rear via, right, for instance, you would feel like traffic is still bad. If you didn't use a particular thing, you'd feel like it's terrible, which is, I guess, why one of the reasons why it's hard for people to understand the cries of normal people or lower LSM people who say the trains don't work and we want the trains to work. So you wouldn't get it because you get into a car, you drive off. So I think at times the separation of industries and the impact of industries is always blanketed to say, yeah, but they spent that type of money on stadiums and we didn't get anything. It's very easy for you to say that. But what happens is that change and growth and infrastructure projects don't necessarily, it doesn't happen overnight. If you go to a place that's being developed, it happens over time. And over 10 years, you realize, no, man, this is amazing. Look at something as simple as like a Lanceria. Lanceria, if you've been going to Lanceria for more than 10 years, you know that Lanceria has grown. But if you started flying out of Lanceria 2 years ago, nothing would have necessarily changed for you at Lanceria. So that's why it doesn't all happen at one go. But over a longer period of time, you realize, man, things have changed.
I mean, it could be the same someone that started driving from Victoria to Joburg
right,
wouldn't
Waterfall.
Realize
the
before
impact Waterfall.
Of the train.
Yes.
Or even Waterfall. Okay. So in your last thing, you were saying that as South Africans, we are overly inward looking.
Yes.
There's a Pan-African that as a continent, we would be better. We would be better organized, with self-sufficient. How do we balance off the benefits of a united Africa versus protecting our self-interest in terms of, even if it's barbershops?
I like that. Before I get to the normal mom and pop type of shops, I want to start to get this infrastructure thing. I'm liking it, and then from a SADC perspective, right? Yeah. There is a proposed north-south like railway corridor that should go from, I think, the DRC all the way down to Durban. This would open up economic opportunities for all the countries involved, right? To a major port on the continent and even in the southern hemisphere. So why is it so hard to fund that project from all the countries involved that would benefit? What happens is that it's a very sort of like, well, South Africa should carry the brunt of it. But a majority of the line will be through Zimbabwe, Zambia, into DRC. We're all going to benefit from the line. Botswana will benefit from the line, right? Everybody, Angola will benefit from the line.
Even if it doesn't go through the country directly,
yes,
there's easier access
to a main railway line.
Yeah.
So the country, South Africa, then has to look at this line and say, what do we benefit and what do we need to put in? Because everything's got to have a return on investment. But everybody else has got to chip in along the line as well. So that's one of the things that, from a Pan-Africanist perspective, has been rhetoric, and there hasn't been actual tangible money down. We've got the plans, right? But AfCFTA is a great way to look at it, where we're starting to take away a lot of the legalese that block intra-African trade. Because it's important to be able to move goods in and out, legally move goods in and out of countries, right? But understanding the economic value of those goods moving across these borders, and also seeing what does the sending country get and what does the receiving party country get. Let's come back to mom and pop shops. I believe that there is a debate to be had when it comes to immigration specifically, and the on the ground economics.
Legal, illegal, or we just
let's even just take spaza shops, right? There's currently, to my understanding, either legislation or papers that are looking at, I'm not sure if it's a white or a green paper, that's looking at the ownership of spaza shops and documenting who owns spaza shops, who's operating them across the country. Now, a lot of people feel that this is needed, on the ground people. Other people feel like this is quite intrusive. Doesn't make sense. Let business be the way that it is. But understanding and taking in the social context of businesses in townships like spazas being owned or seen to be owned by foreign people more than they are by South Africans. You can't then come and say people are seeing it wrong because you don't interact with those businesses on a daily basis. So the people on the ground have something to say, and a lot of the people that are not listening or feel that they are wrong don't live in these communities. So when there's maybe a conversation around food that's past its sell by date, old food, when there's imitation food, when there's toxic food and everything like that, you've got to then regulate what people are eating in a country so that you don't get mass outbreaks, mass sickness, etc. So what does that mean? It means that we've got to document who owns these shops across the country. But what does documentation suddenly do? You are then able to measure the impact. You'll find that people will tell you that the spaza shop industry goes from 50 billion to 180 billion to 200 billion a year. Everyone is thumb sucking.
Yeah.
Everyone's literally thumb sucking.
There's no tangible
thing.
Science to it.
Yes. Now the conversation then becomes, the other side of the coin is, are the people who are currently operating these shops contributing sufficiently to the country? I can't measure that because I don't know. I don't have the data.
In the form of tax.
Right? So anybody who opposes us measuring something, even the taxi industry is measured, guys. They measure. They know how many taxis are on the road, right? Even though they are a private entity that runs for public good, right? Relative to how and where they operate. So we must have these things being done. So my view on it is quite simple. The South Africans on the ground who are crying about shops being owned by people who are coming from outside the country, I don't want to get into the legal thing because that's another conversation, are impacting how their communities run, and they feel like money leaves. Because I don't know of a spaza organization or someone who owns 3, 4, 5 spazas saying, I'm going to build a soccer field for the community. I don't know of those cases. And maybe they're not coming up to the top because businesses that operate in communities must impact the community for good.
Yeah. There should be empowerment of some sort.
100%.
Yeah. So you are saying that it really wouldn't matter as long as one is not being documented.
Yeah.
And 2, there's no empowerment.
Yes.
Do you not think if there were more locals or if there was more regulation around that, I guess also comes the border chat.
Yeah.
That those things would be achieved.
I think we the border chat is important.
Yeah.
Now, let's maybe go to the border chat. When the people who operate the shops don't necessarily maybe feel like they are locals or ingratiate themselves to the local population in a way that the local population feels a positivity in their involvement in their local community, you then find that
including the employment aspect,
you'll find that there will be some aggression towards it because people see it as capital flight. They see it as, I pay, yes, I get something, but there's always a profit, and that profit doesn't necessarily feed back into this community. And we don't want all of the profit because there's a profit motive. That's why you got into business. But like soccer field, nyana, bibs for the kids around the school, soccer balls, something. And this is a conversation that I had with a Somalian national in Davos, funny enough, right? We drove and he says, no, you guys are killing, you're killing my brothers in South Africa. And I placed it to him. I said, what are your brothers, take into account that there is an economic activity taking place. What are your brothers doing for South Africans in the communities that they own shops in or rent shops in? And he couldn't answer. And it is at that point where the same conversation we have around mining companies is the same conversation we want to have around spaza shops. And I want people to understand and see that if we can ask the other, we should be asking the other side of the coin as well.
And that balancing trade-offs, and I'm happy you mentioned mining because I know that's something you're passionate about. Transition.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
The jet.
Run us through your view on that call.
The just energy transition is a half-cooked program currently. The need exists for transition, but not this way. That's literally my thing.
What's the current way and what's the way that it should be?
The current way is to increase the capabilities of renewables within the effective, I would say, energy availability factor. So let's get renewables up to a standard that we feel can contribute effectively to our energy mix as a country, and then we could consider, right, taking off capacity in certain areas. This is the only way it should be done. So the conversation should not have been to close power stations. The conversation should have been very simple. We are going to grow renewables to I don't know, maybe even 12,000 megawatts. That's what we're going to do. That should have been the conversation. Everything else will leave the way that it is, but we're just going to grow capacity of renewables. And then when we feel that people will naturally grow towards or go towards these things, because you cannot take away the competitive advantage of a country like South Africa by stripping it from coal. You cannot do that. It makes no sense. But I agree we should, for the good of the planet, even though collective responsibility and who did the problem is something else, we should find ourselves in a position where we say, we are going to grow nuclear power, we're going to grow renewable power, whether that's photovoltaic, whether that's gas, whether that's hydrogen, whatever it is, we're going to grow those aggressively, right? And we're not going to touch coal until we feel that the general populace and how our industries operate in the country is at a level where the mix is really good enough for us to say we can start to decommission. But then what do we do about the people in the regions like Mpumalanga where we are decommissioning these power stations? So that's the balance. That's why I said I don't believe in the jet, right? As it is currently written right now. I believe that, yes, what is being proposed around shifting makes sense, but let's do it right. Let's do it right. Because they don't even have enough money for the plan. I've read the document. There isn't enough money pledged for the thing. There's a little bit of, like, let's put in a little bit and then let's hope things work. There's 1.5 trillion rand needed. If we get over 500 billion of pledged money, I'll be surprised. I'd be heavily surprised. And maybe only 160 billion rand has actually materialized from the IPG, the international partners groups. So they're calling it a catalytic fund because they're only going to give you 160 billion, and you must now go fetch another 1.3 trillion. From where, my brother?
So would it have been a bad thing if the nuclear under the former President Zuma proceeded, even in its state with the Russians?
So that's also so what is very key for people to understand is that in 2011 there were, you could almost call it pre-bids. There was a need, and everybody understood South Africa needed to go nuclear. So France came, South Korea came, and I don't know which other countries, I stand corrected. They came and they basically pre-sold themselves to President Zuma to say, you're going to need energy, and we believe it's nuclear, and we've got experience with this, and let's have a conversation. And Russia was part of that group as well. Now, the problem that arose was that it was Russia who came up with the most effective portion of how we could do this and the most cost-effective one. Because what people don't want to have a conversation about in South Africa, when it comes to Eskom, who built Kusile and Midupi? Who built it? Who are the companies that actually built it? When furnaces are falling on top of each other, who built it? Why are we not having this conversation?
Who built it?
There's a couple of companies that built it. They also come from the same construction cartel companies that built our stadiums. And they fleeced us. No one wants to have these conversations, TJ. So suddenly when we say we want a Russian company to assist us to build these things, mainstream media, MSM comes in and says, no, this thing must be wrong. Because it's not their companies, it's not the companies that fund them that are going to get these contracts, right? You're closing tabs. Russian companies. Why Russian companies?
So with that said, who would you say are friends between West, East, Global South, etc.?
Interestingly enough, I think the West has realized that they've been squeezing the necks of South Africa for a long time. If you look at the posture of the West now, specifically towards South Africa, it's changed a lot in a very short amount of time. From the conversations of we're going to take you out of AGOA to them hosting an AGOA conference in South Africa, to them now taking off sanctions from Zimbabwe. Something is going on in SADC and people are not realizing this, right? Remember, over 10 years, you start to realize the change, but in the year that you're in, you don't realize much change.
Yeah.
But a lot has changed in how America deals with us. From the years of Obama, who did nothing for Africa. He did nothing. To us now, looking at what is it that's happened over the last 10 years, it's changed.
Is it true Trump did more?
Trump didn't do anything which was great for us because we could self-determine.
Okay, fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
So whether it was the chicken industry that could put in tariffs to try and slow down the dumping, right, of chicken, because chickens grow everywhere, my brother. Especially in a country like South Africa, so much diverse, I'd say, climates and I'd say pockets, geographic pockets. We should not be importing chicken. I don't believe that makes sense to me. And I dare someone to come and say it makes sense. Because we've got our own breeds, all the way from the top, from mother stock to the eggs that we have. We've got a strong chicken industry that needs to be supported internally so that we have this cheap form of protein available at cost-effective pricing.
You mentioned mainstream media.
Yeah.
And I assume that is part of the story as to how you got into what you're doing.
Yes.
With your podcasts, with your IG page, your TikToks.
Yeah.
We were supposed to actually start there in terms of what you do and why.
We're here now.
Yeah, we're here now. Walk us through that.
So
how'd you get here?
So I think at times we as citizens that have an opportunity to do something, even if it's small, we don't take up our civic responsibility, right, to at least inform people so that they make their own sort of judgment on things. When it came to how I got into the space, I realized that a lot of the data-driven socioeconomic commentary and conversations were not necessarily happening in South Africa. Everything was opinion-based. Everything was based off opinion. That's why if you look at all the major newspapers and all the publications and publication houses, they closed down their opinion site now because you have to pay for it. People can't even go to certain stories. The only breaking stories are considered free, right, in South Africa.
Yeah.
Right? Everything else is closed. SABC is not closed, right, because obviously it's publicly funded, but everything else is closed. Now, there's obviously a profit motive in that. That's one. But two, I saw someone actually say, why are certain stories open and some closed? So it's like, no, you should definitely read this. But the other stuff, if you want to find out how South Africans are saving, how they're doing stuff, the data behind it, that one's behind an article's closed, behind a paywall. So I figured that what needed to start happening was that we needed to find a way to create a space for data-driven socioeconomic stories that I was able to get in other countries. If I wanted to find out in Europe what's going on, in the UK what's going on, in the US what's going on, in China what's going on, in Russia what's going on, there's data behind a lot of those conversations. And we have a very strong data unit in South Africa, right? Stats to say is strong, right? They paint the picture for what it is. CSIR, strong data. We're not really reflecting that data in a palatable way. Hey, look at that.
Hey.
In a palatable way to the everyday person. So that's how and why I got into this. But also I didn't like the posture of mainstream media in South Africa. Everything is negative. And I dare people to tag me in positive stories about the country. Because is it so bad that we're still the number one economy on the continent, 400 plus billion US dollars? Prophets of doom profit when there is chaos or when there is the perception of chaos. We agree. There is no country that's perfect on the planet. But South Africa is not as bad as what you think it is. And now the problem is that these sentiments have carried on for such a long time that the average South African believes negatively in their own country. I disagree.
How much of that would you say contributes towards the lack of youth participation in politics?
Greatly, my brother. Greatly. And it's crisis time, right? But also the reality is that we need to shift who we think should be voting as a bloc aggressively. Early 20s are not as civically inclined to be involved as somebody who is 30, who likely has a small family, who is now heavily affected by taxation, who wants to understand how the country is working, who wants to affect change in the way that they see fit as part of a grouping of people. So the expectation for youth to vote needs to be tempered down a bit, because they're not going to be as civically inclined as you and I, right? Now, taking from that, there is a clear correlation with that when you put it against relative people turning 30 and voting. Because even look at the stats of how many people, new voters, came into the system now. It's people that have just gone 28 to 32. Massive number of people are flooding in, because they are now starting to figure out that my everyday life is affected by decisions that I made at a high level, at a political, at a governmental level, and I'm not involved. So they would start to get involved. But I think that there is an unfounded pressure on really young people, the 18-year-olds to the 25 to the 28-year-olds, to be involved when nobody has been able to communicate the positives of them doing that.
So with that said, what would you say people need to think about, consider when they make their mark in the elections on the 29th?
Interestingly enough, I need to figure it out. I think for me personally, I don't know who I'm going to vote for, right? But I know that I always make that distinction on the day when I wake up. For me, I always say, relative to all that I've heard, and I like voting early. I get up very early so that I can, because I'm a media person myself, I love to see it unfold. So I get up very early and I go to the polling station, I vote, and then I sit and I watch what's going on in the day. And I think that South Africa is at a very interesting time. I think there's positivity in how we've postured towards the global community relative to things like the ICJ and our international relations, right? I think at the same time, we are getting investment in, right? We're also stimulating internal investment, because investment, we look too much at foreign direct investment, FDI. A lot of people look at FDI, money coming out in. We need to get the money that sits in South African trusts to start to work in the country,
Which
guys.
part is that Regulation 28
Yes.
also speaks to that.
Yes.
But we've opened it to increase more international, but
we should be getting more money that sits in trust. There are trillions of rands that sit in trusts. We also need to figure out a way, right, of matching what the asset management and asset management industry and the PIC and how they work together. We need to find a way to merge this thing, because we don't need to create a special vehicle for a sovereign wealth fund. The PIC just needs a mandate to invest a new bunch of money that comes in a sovereign wealth fund type of way. So it already is there. The PIC's got the structures, etc., and all of these things. Because the PIC also works with the private industry. 20% of their money is given to private investors to manage on behalf of the PIC. So a sovereign wealth fund for the country does not necessarily only need to be state-run, because that will come with its own issues and challenges. But it can't only be privately run, because it's going to go too capitalistic in its motive and not serve what we want. All of these things are important for people to understand when they vote, that there are certain things that are done in South Africa that can be easily changed, right? That don't need mega things, black banks, etc., and all of this type of stuff. But then there are hard things that say, what is our way of life as South Africans, right? Because we have also become highly dependent as South Africans. We also have a culture of not paying as South Africans. And we need to factor that into how our politicians posture themselves to us. Thus, we are a pseudo welfare state. These are the things that are there. People get the government that they deserve, not the one that they want.
Fair enough. Which is similar to one of your quotes that you get paid what you negotiate, not what you will.
100%.
Yes. With that said, guys, go out on the 29th of May. Make your votes. Your vote's your secret. Let it be whoever you want it to be, but let it be a conscious, intentional decision. With that said, thank you for coming.
Yes.
Guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, follow on all the platforms down below. Guys, thank you.
Cheers, man.
Same place, same time next week.